The Haunting of Hollow's End. I wasn't always afraid of Halloween. In fact, it used to be my favorite holiday. Something about the cool October air, the smell of decaying leaves, and the strange electric feeling that ran through the streets gave the night a kind of magic. Every year, I'd go all out with costumes, haunted houses, and parties. But that was before the night I went to Hollow's End. It was 2014, and I was fresh out of college, living in a small apartment with my best friend, Kevin. He'd always been more into the creepy side of things than me, with his love for old ghost stories and horror films. I liked Halloween for the fun. He liked it for the fear. About a week before Halloween, Kevin stumbled across an old article online about a place called Hollow's End, a ghost town about 2 hours out of the city. According to the article, it was abandoned in the late 1800s after a series of brutal murders and disappearances that no one could explain. The town was apparently cursed, the locals said, and anyone who dared to stay overnight would vanish or go insane. Over the years, it had become a sort of urban legend, and very few people had ever dared to go there. Naturally, Kevin wanted to go, and because I'm an idiot and I let my curiosity get the better of me, I agreed. We packed up on the morning of October 31st. The drive took longer than we expected. As we wound through narrow, deserted roads, the trees on either side seemed to close in, casting long, twisted shadows across the car. The further we drove, the less our phones worked. Kevin's excitement was palpable, but I couldn't shake the growing knot in my stomach. By the time we arrived, it was late afternoon, and the sun was starting to sink behind the hills. Hollow's End wasn't much to look at, just a few dilapidated buildings and overgrown streets. A faded wooden sign, half buried in the ground, still bore the town's name in cracked, peeling paint. We parked the car at the edge of town and got out. The air was unnaturally still, like the whole place was holding its breath. I could feel the weight of the place, an oppressive heaviness that pressed down on my chest. Kevin was practically bouncing with excitement as he pulled out his phone to document the trip. We started with the old town square, which was really just a patch of dirt surrounded by the remains of a few buildings. There was an old saloon, its windows shattered and roof caving in, and a general store long since looted. But it was the church that caught my eye. The church stood at the far end of the square, a tall, imposing structure with a sagging roof and a bell tower that seemed to lean slightly to one side. The doors were closed, but as I stared at them, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. Something about that church wasn't right. "Let's check it out," Kevin said, already heading for the doors. I hesitated, but I wasn't about to let him go in there alone, so I followed. The doors groaned as Kevin pushed them open, the sound echoing through the empty space inside. The interior was just as decayed as the rest of the town, with rows of rotting pews and a thick layer of dust covering everything. The only light came from the stained glass windows, which cast eerie patterns across the floor. At the front of the church was an altar and, behind it, a large wooden cross. But something was off. The cross wasn't right side up. It was upside down. "What the hell?" I muttered under my breath. Kevin was already snapping pictures, completely oblivious to the strange energy in the room. I felt it, though. The air was colder here, and there was a faint smell like rotting meat. My stomach churned. "I don't like this place, Kev," I said, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet. "Come on, man, it's just a church," he replied, grinning. "Don't go all superstitious on me now." But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. As Kevin wandered deeper into the church, I stayed near the entrance, my eyes darting to every shadow. That's when I saw something move, just a flicker out of the corner of my eye near the altar. "Did you see that?" I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. Kevin turned to look at me, confused. "See what?" "There, by the altar." I saw something." He frowned and walked over to where I was pointing, his phone flashlight cutting through the gloom. "There's nothing here, dude. You're just freaking yourself out." But I knew what I saw. Or at least, I thought I did. I was about to insist we leave when something crashed to the floor behind us. We both spun around, and I swear to God, I've never felt my blood turn to ice so quickly. One of the pews had tipped over, but there was no one there. Kevin laughed nervously. "Probably just old wood, right?" "Yeah," I said, my voice shaking. "Probably." But I didn't believe it. We didn't stay much longer in the church. I convinced Kevin to leave, though I could tell he was disappointed. As we walked back into the town square, the sun had nearly set, and the shadows seemed to stretch even longer. That's when the real horror began. It started with the voices. Faint at first, like a whisper carried on the wind. I thought I was imagining it, but then Kevin stopped walking and turned his head. "Do you hear that?" he asked. I nodded, my mouth dry. The whispers were coming from all around us, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. The air had grown colder, and I could feel my breath catching in my throat. "We should go," I said, gripping Kevin's arm. But before we could take another step, the whispers grew louder, angry. It was like dozens of voices speaking at once, overlapping in a cacophony of rage and pain. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized they were getting closer. "Run," I whispered, but Kevin was frozen in place, staring at something ahead of us. I followed his gaze and saw them, shadows, figures moving through the darkness between the buildings. They were human-shaped, but wrong, distorted. Their faces were twisted in unnatural expressions, their eyes black pits that seemed to suck in the light around them. Without thinking, I grabbed Kevin's arm and yanked him toward the car. We ran, the whispers chasing us, growing louder with every step. My lungs burned and my legs ached, but I didn't dare slow down. I could feel them behind us, their cold breath on the back of my neck. We reached the car and scrambled inside, slamming the door shut just as one of the figures lunged at the window. I screamed as its face pressed against the glass, its mouth open in a silent scream, its black eyes staring straight into mine. "Go! Go! Go!" I shouted, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. Kevin fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking as he tried to start the engine. The car roared to life and we sped down the dirt road, leaving Hollow's End behind. But the figures didn't follow. We drove in silence for a long time, both of us too terrified to speak. When we finally reached the main road, Kevin pulled over and turned to look at me. "What the hell was that?" he whispered, his face pale and drenched in sweat. "I don't know," I said, my voice shaking. "But we're never going back." For weeks after, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those faces, heard those whispers. Kevin tried to brush it off, saying we were just imagining things, but I knew better. Something was wrong with that place. A few months later, I looked up Hollow's End again, trying to find more information about what we had experienced. That's when I found an old police report from 1987. A group of 4 teenagers had gone to the town on a dare. They never came back. Their car was found a few miles from the town, the doors open, the keys still in the ignition. The police had searched the area for days, but they never found the bodies. The only clue was a note left in one of the girls' journals, scrawled in messy handwriting. "They're in the shadows. They're watching." Happy Halloween, my friends. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, and leave a comment.